The classroom fell silent. Professor Mitchell's cold eyes locked onto her, a smirk barely hiding his amusement. "Let's see if you can solve this," he said, voice dripping with sarcasm. He slammed a crumpled paper on the desk. A problem. He'd invented on the spot. Impossible. A fake. "You might find this a bit tricky," he added, mocking her accent, making the whole room chuckle. All eyes turned to Lena, the quiet girl with the thick foreign accent, new to this city and this university. She stared down at the paper, heart pounding. But instead of fear, something else flickered in her eyes. Quiet determination. The challenge was set. The game was on. The classroom smelled faintly of chalk dust and stale coffee, the kind of lingering aroma that clung to old books and nervous energy. The worn wooden desks creaked softly under restless students, their whispers a low hum beneath the professor's voice. Outside, the spring sun filtered through tall windows, casting long golden slats across the faded green walls, where posters of famous mathematicians stared down like silent judges. In the middle of this, sitting near the back, was Lena, her dark hair fell in loose waves, framing a face that bore traces of exhaustion and hope. Her eyes, deep and observant, flicked nervously toward the front of the room. She tugged at the sleeves of her threadbare sweater, a subtle shield against the chill of uncertainty that always seemed to hang in the air. Lena had come a long way. Just a year ago, she had left behind the bustling streets of her hometown, a place where dreams often got swallowed by the noise of everyday survival. Here, in this foreign city, surrounded by strangers whose voices rolled and twisted in ways she was still learning to catch, she was a ghost, quiet, overlooked, her thick accent marking her as different, a puzzle many didn't bother to solve. But Lena wasn't just any student. Beneath her humble exterior was a mind sharp as a razor, honed through years of working late nights, helping her family and teaching herself advanced math from borrowed textbooks. Numbers had always been her refuge, a language that never judged, never mocked. Yet in this classroom, the weight of being an outsider was heavy. Whispers sometimes drifted her way, comments thinly veiled as jokes. "You sure you understand the words, Lena?" someone had asked once, laughing with friends. The smiles were polite but distant. Her ideas, when she dared to share, were met with nods that never quite reached the eyes. Today felt different, though. A quiet fire simmered beneath her calm, fueled by every glance, every snicker. She wasn't here to prove them all wrong, not just yet, but to hold on to the one thing that kept her moving forward: belief in herself. Around her, classmates shifted, some stealing glances, others pretending not to notice. The professor, with his impeccable suits and sharp tongue, ruled the room like a king on a throne, respected, feared, and occasionally cruel. But Lena's fingers tightened around the pen in her hand. The challenge wasn't just a test of intellect. It was a chance, however small, to rewrite the story they thought they knew. The professor's voice sliced through the quiet room like a sharp blade. "Lena, since you've been so quiet, maybe you'd like to try this," he said, sliding the crumpled sheet across the desk toward her with a pointed smirk. The class watched eagerly, some with barely concealed amusement, others with bored detachment. Lena felt the weight of every gaze, like a spotlight burning down on her. She unfolded the paper carefully, eyes scanning the problem. It was a tangle of symbols, numbers, and impossible twists, a puzzle designed to confuse, to trap. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. "Why me?" she thought. "Why make me the target?" The professor's mocking tone still echoed in her mind. The way he had exaggerated her accent earlier. "You might find this a bit tricky." The words stung worse than the sneers she had learned to ignore. Her fingers trembled, but she forced herself to breathe slowly. She couldn't let them see her falter. The room felt suffocating now. The walls seemed to close in, the noise of whispers growing louder, twisting into waves of doubt crashing inside her head. "They don't think I belong here," she thought bitterly. "They expect me to fail." One student near the front chuckled softly, exchanging a glance with a friend. "Bet she can't even understand the question," he whispered. Lena's jaw tightened. Years of struggle, sacrifices, long nights studying, by dim lamps, all boiled into this moment. She wanted to scream, to shout, "I'm more than my accent, more than your jokes." But silence held her captive. The professor leaned in, eyes gleaming with cruel satisfaction. "Take your time, Lena. We're all waiting." The pressure pressed down like a physical weight. She felt the urge to give up, to fold beneath the gaze of so many doubters. But deep inside, a quiet voice whispered, steady and firm, "You are not alone. You are not less." Her mind flicked back to the long journey that had brought her here, the small apartment she shared with her mother, the countless hours teaching herself calculus from battered books, the encouragement from a teacher back. A home who believed in her. This is the test, the one that counts. Her hand moved instinctively, tracing the complex symbols as if they were old friends. The problem wasn't real, she realized. A trap meant to humiliate, but traps could be escaped. And maybe, just maybe, outsmarted. Around her, the room held its breath. "Come on, Lena," whispered a voice beside her, a classmate she barely knew, eyes filled with quiet encouragement. She looked up briefly, catching the hope flickering. There, for a moment the weight lifted, replaced by a spark of determination. This is more than a problem to solve, she thought. It's the moment I take back my voice. The professor cleared his throat loudly, breaking the fragile calm. "Well, do you have an answer, or should we move on?" Lena's mind raced, heart pounding faster. She felt the eyes of her peers, some doubtful, others expectant, many skeptical. But beneath it all, she heard a different sound, the steady beating of her own resolve. Slowly, she began writing, each line deliberate, each step a quiet rebellion. The room seemed to shrink and expand all at once, the noise fading, the tension mounting, until finally the silence was broken by her voice. "Professor, I believe I've found the solution." Gasps rippled through the room. Professor Mitchell's smirk faltered, replaced by something unreadable. Lena's hands steadied. The challenge was no longer just his, it was hers. The classroom buzzed, but not with the usual restless chatter. This time, it was charged, electric with anticipation and disbelief. Lena's words hung in the air like a challenge, daring anyone to question it. But inside, her mind was anything but calm. As she watched the professor's eyes, narrow, cold and calculating, a swirl of emotions rose within her. Doubt, fear, but beneath it all, a stubborn spark of hope. "Can I really pull this off?" she wondered. "Have I prepared enough for moments like this?" Her thoughts slipped briefly back to the small apartment where she lived with her mother, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. She could still hear the creak of the old wooden floorboards, smell the faint scent of jasmine tea her mother brewed every evening. Those nights had been long and lonely, but also filled with secret victories. Remember the nights when you stayed up late, solving problems that no one else even looked at, she thought, when the silence wasn't empty, but a space where you could think clearly. A flashback swept through her mind. The worn math notebook sprawled open on the kitchen table, pages filled with neat, careful equations. Her mother's gentle voice encouraging her, "You're smarter than you know, Lena. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." The memory brought a soft warmth, easing the tension knotting her stomach. But the present was relentless. Professor Mitchell straightened, stepping closer. "Your confidence is amusing," he sneered. "Let's see if it holds when you explain." Murmurs rippled among the students. Some whispered excitedly, others exchanged skeptical glances. A few faces softened with surprise. Lena noticed, briefly, a boy in the front row shifting his weight, his expression unreadable. It was Jordan, quiet, kind, and one of the few classmates who had ever spoken to her without condescension. They hadn't spoken much, but those few moments mattered. "Explain your steps," the professor demanded, crossing his arms. Lena took a deep breath, steadying herself. Her fingers traced the lines of the solution she had written, each symbol and calculation familiar, the product of countless hours of self-study and quiet determination. She began slowly, carefully. The classroom's tension softened as her voice gained strength. "First, I identified the false assumptions embedded in the problem," she explained, which allowed me to simplify the equation and isolate the variable. From there, applying the integral theorem, we can derive the correct solution. A few heads turned, some furrowing their brows, others whispering softly to neighbors. Her explanation unfolded like a carefully woven story, precise, clear, and confident. Yet beneath her calm surface, the battle continued. What if they think it's luck, she thought. What if this is just a fluke? Her gaze flicked briefly to the professor. He leaned forward, lips twitching, trying to mask frustration. The social dynamic shifted palpably. Some students now whispered in admiration. She actually knows her stuff, one said under his breath. Others still wore expressions of disbelief. Lena's pulse quickened. At that moment, Jordan caught her eye again and gave a small nod. Silent support that bolstered her courage. Behind the professor, a group of students exchanged glances. One girl, Maria, rolled her eyes, but whispered loudly enough for some to hear. Guess? We all underestimated her. That sting of jealousy was familiar. It reminded Lena of the many moments she had been dismissed. Her accent, her quiet nature, her outsider status, all easy targets. A flicker of anger rose, not towards the classmates, but at the system that made her fight so hard just to be seen. The classroom felt smaller now, the noise a distant echo. Her mind drifted again, this time to another memory, her first math competition back home where she had solved a problem no one else could, winning the respect of peers and teachers alike. But those victories felt distant here, replaced by a new struggle, a new fight to belong. The professor broke the silence sharply. This is impressive, Lena, he said, voice low but sharp. But can you prove it holds under these new conditions? He flipped the page and tossed another complex question toward her. The room tensed again. Lena's heart pounded, sweat prickling at her temples. She hesitated, momentarily overwhelmed by the sudden shift. But then, the quiet determination she had cultivated over years surged forward. Her hand moved swiftly, sketching solutions, making connections. Her voice returned, stronger. Yes, by adjusting the parameters and applying boundary conditions, the solution remains valid. Murmurs of surprise turned into murmurs of admiration. The professor's face tightened, his usual condescending smile replaced by a grudging respect, though he hid it well. Lena's classmates started to lean in, some whispering encouragement. The room's atmosphere had changed, from mockery to fascination. Behind her, the faint sound of the corridor echoed, where her friend Amina waited outside, unaware of the battle unfolding inside. Amina, who had been her rock since day one, encouraging her to keep going, reminding her that her dreams were worth fighting for. Almost there, Lena thought. This is more than a test. This is a turning point. The tension inside the room was a tightrope. Every step she took could send her tumbling or soaring. Her breath caught as the professor finally spoke. Well, Lena, it seems you've surprised us all. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. But Lena's gaze did not waver. Maybe this is the moment where things begin to change. The classroom air seemed to thicken, as if the very walls were holding their breath. Every eye was fixed on Lena, the girl who had been invisible just moments ago, now standing at the center of a storm she hadn't asked for, but was determined to face. Her palms were slick with sweat, fingers trembling slightly as she stepped forward to the chalkboard. The rough wood beneath her fingertips was cool and unforgiving, grounding her in the present. She glanced down at the chalk, white and dusty, her only weapon against a tide of doubt and scorn. The murmurs had faded to a hush. Even the distant hum of the city outside the tall windows seemed to pause, waiting for what was to come. She took a breath, deep and slow. This is it, the challenge that would either break her or define her. Her thoughts spun back to the journey. That led her here, the cramped apartment where her mother's laughter had been the only light. The nights spent poring over textbooks in a language that wasn't her own. The whispers of doubt that had tried to drown her. I am more than their doubts. Her fingers curled around the chalk, the familiar roughness grounding her. Step by step, She began writing. Symbols, numbers, equations flowing from her mind onto the board like a story unfolding. The squeak of chalk punctuated the silence, a rhythm beating out her courage. The room was a canvas painted with anticipation. As her hand moved, she felt the weight of every gaze, every breath, every heartbeat sync with hers. Her voice broke the silence, steady but soft. This equation is more than numbers. It's a story of balance, of how every element interacts to create something greater than itself. She paused, letting the words sink in. The professor's eyes narrowed, but the smirk was gone, replaced by something unreadable. Her fingers traced through complex calculations, connecting dots that only she saw. The board filled with her logic. Clear, elegant, undeniable. A faint scent of chalk dust mingled with the faint aroma of her own nervous breath. She felt the rough texture of the board beneath her fingertips. The coldness seeping through, steadying her shaking hands. You are here because you fought for this. Her heart pounded loud in her ears, each beat a drum of defiance. She recalled her mother's voice, warm and steady. Believe in yourself, Lena. They can't take that away. A wave of emotion surged. Pride, fear, determination. Her eyes flicked to the classroom, faces wide with disbelief, admiration, surprise. She was no longer invisible. Her voice grew stronger. This problem was designed to trip me up, to humiliate. But I see it for what it is. A puzzle, and puzzles are meant to be solved. The chalk squeaked sharply as she drew the final lines, the solution unfolding like a revelation. A breath hung heavy in the room. Her chest tightened, every muscle taut. The professor stepped forward, voice low and measured. Impressive, Lena. You've done what many thought impossible. But the words felt hollow compared to the storm inside her. She closed her eyes briefly, the rush of memories crashing in, the setbacks, the small victories, the silent nights filled with questions and answers no one else sought. This is more than a lesson in math. This is my story. She opened her eyes to the soft murmur of applause, hesitant at first, then growing. Jordan stood and clapped, his smile genuine. Maria, the girl who had whispered doubt, looked away, silent. Lena's gaze swept across the room, faces once filled with doubt, now reflecting respect. The professor's smirk softened into a nod of acknowledgement. The tension that had gripped the room began to dissolve, replaced by a quiet warmth. She felt a tear slip down her cheek, not from sadness but triumph. The room was no longer a cage but a stage. Her voice dropped to a quiet, reflective tone. I didn't come here to prove them wrong. She looked out at the faces, inviting them into her story. I came here to prove to myself that I belong. A pause. The city outside the window breathed life into the room again. The golden light spilled over the chalkboard, illuminating the solution, a symbol of hope, resilience, and quiet strength. Lena took a step back, heart still pounding, but steady now. The challenge had been met, the lesson learned, and as the applause grew, echoing in the room, she knew this was only the beginning. The classroom remained still for a long, suspended moment, as if time itself hesitated to move forward. Then, like a slowly rising tide, the silence broke. A ripple of astonished whispers spread among the students. Faces, once skeptical, now wore expressions of genuine awe. Heads turned toward Lena with a new kind of respect. Eyes that had overlooked her before now, searching for her in the crowd. Jordan was the first to rise, clapping softly at first, then more enthusiastically. Others followed, their hesitant applause swelling into a steady, heartfelt ovation. The sound filled the room, shaking the walls that had once seemed so confining. Lena felt the warmth of their acceptance wash over her, mingling with relief and a deep, quiet pride. The weight that had pressed on her chest for months, years even, lifted just a little. Across the room, the professor's expression shifted in slow, deliberate movements. His usual smug confidence was replaced by a flicker of surprise, then something harder to read, a grudging acknowledgement. For a moment he was silent, watching as the crowd celebrated Lena's triumph. Finally, he cleared his throat, his voice calm but edged with respect. "Well done, Lena. I underestimated you." The words hung heavy, as if admitting defeat was a bitter pill. But in that admission lay a lesson, not just for Lena, but for the entire room. Maria, who had been one of the loudest doubters, lowered her gaze and offered a small nod. The social tide had turned, shifting power subtly but unmistakably. Some students whispered among themselves, trading surprised glances, re-evaluating their assumptions. Lena caught Jordan's eye again. His smile was steady, genuine, a quiet anchor in the sea of newfound recognition. The professor's gaze lingered on her a moment longer. Then, with a slight nod, he returned to his desk, conceding the battle. The atmosphere softened, tension dissipating into something warmer, more open. A few students approached Lena tentatively, offering congratulations, genuine smiles replacing past skepticism. She returned their gestures, her own smile tentative but sincere. In that moment, the classroom felt transformed, no longer a place of exclusion, but one where possibility had taken root. Lena's heartbeat slowed, the adrenaline ebbing away, replaced by a calm certainty. She had faced the challenge, not just the problem on paper, but the doubts, the mockery, the barriers, and she had emerged not just unbroken, but stronger. The city outside the window hummed quietly, a reminder that life continued beyond these walls. But Lena knew she carried something new within her now, a quiet power, forged in struggle and perseverance. As the applause tapered, she felt a hand lightly touch her shoulder. It was Amina, her oldest friend and fiercest supporter, who whispered, "You did it. They finally see you." Lena nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Not just see me," she said softly. "They know me now." The moment was fleeting, but it marked a turning point. From here, the path wouldn't always be easy. But now, Lena walked it with a confidence born of hard-won victory. In the quiet moments after the applause faded, Lena sat back at her desk, the weight of what had just happened settling gently around her, like a soft cloak. The room, once heavy with doubt and judgment, now felt different, lighter, almost welcoming. She thought back to the girl who had walked nervously into this classroom months ago, uncertain and unseen. That girl had been cautious, afraid to speak up, carrying the invisible burden of every whispered doubt and sideways glance. But today, Lena realized, she had reclaimed something far greater than academic success. She had reclaimed her voice. Not just the sound of words spoken aloud, but the quiet certainty that she belonged here, in this room, in this world. The journey ahead was still uncertain. Challenges would come. Voices of doubt might rise again. Yet for the first time, Lena felt ready to face whatever came with resilience forged from hard-won victories. Her classmates who once ignored her now nodded with respect. Some even approached her with questions and smiles, eager to learn from someone who had proved herself under pressure. Amina, her steadfast friend, beamed beside her, a reminder that support had always been there, even when hidden. And the professor, the man who had set the challenge, now regarded her differently. Behind his stern exterior, there was a newfound respect, even a hint of mentorship. He had seen her not as a target, but as a peer. Lena's story was no longer just about overcoming a cruel test. It was about breaking barriers, cultural, social, and personal. Opportunities began to unfold. Invitations to collaborate on projects, offers to tutor classmates, and even the possibility of a research assistant position. Things that once felt out of reach now shimmered within grasp. Most importantly, Lena had learned that her identity was not defined by how others saw her, but by the strength she carried within. The accents, the struggles, the quiet moments of doubt, they were parts of her story, but they did not limit her. She smiled softly, feeling the calm assurance of someone who had weathered the storm and found clarity. This was not just an end, but a beginning, a chance to build, to grow, and to inspire both herself and others. Lena's story reminds us all, challenges can become our greatest teachers, and every doubt faced is a step towards self-discovery. What's one obstacle you're ready to overcome today? Share your story in the comments below. If you found inspiration here, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Let's grow stronger together.